and welcome everyone. My name is Stephen Goldberg of Optimus Performance, bringing you practical tips and ideas on leadership, team development, and employee performance in the workplace. And that includes salespeople. And I'm really happy to have a special guest with me today, Alistair McBride, I'll introduce Al. Welcome, Al. Thank you for being here.
Great to be here, Stephen. Thanks for inviting me on.
Where are you calling in from today?
I'm joining you from Dublin in Ireland at the moment.
Wow, I hear a lot of good things about Ireland. Love to
It's
visit
a
one
good
day.
place. Yeah, it's a good place. If the rain would stop for a while, it'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear it gets a lot of rain. So Alistair McBride is a coach, facilitator, and trainer who has started numerous small businesses. He's a regular guest lecturer and facilitator at multiple universities in Ireland on topics such as cognitive behavioral coaching, entrepreneurship, and innovation. He coaches executives and business owners across an array of industries, including software, law, aviation, telecoms, and corporate finance, to name a few. Over the past few years, he has been giving his clients the psychological edge in negotiation and is currently completing a book of the same name. Al has a new program out called Goliath Negotiation Method. So it sounds like we're going to be talking about negotiation today. And of course, that's an important component of leadership, but especially in sales. And most or almost all business owners have to be good salespeople. They have to be good negotiators. So tell me about, I read, about the type of clients you work with, but tell me why they come to you. What is their concern? What do they come to you to help them improve or address?
Well, it depends. It usually breaks down into two types of clients. So I like to call one half the nice but nervous clients. So these are often more the business owners. I call them nice but nervous because they don't like the negotiation. It's an unpleasantness they have to go through. Usually they're a small business owner who there's a lot at stake and they can't really afford to hand some of these big contracts or big deals to some of their staff or employees. Their staff employee might be involved, but it's too important. But the key thing there is that they're often, how do you say, emotionally under pressure. Usually they have they have holding themselves hostage, you might even say, because they're in a weaker position to start with, because there's a stress, there's also even to the point of desperation sometimes to close a deal, which is never an advantageous position to be in. And so that they have the distinct impression that somebody else would get a better deal in their place, that they're not quite sure how to push back respectfully without risking to destroy the deal, and that they know they're leaving a lot of money and opportunity on the table. But as I said, due to the pressure of the situation, the emotions running high in that negotiation or that sales process, they often capitulate a bit earlier than they'd like to. So that's one type of client. The other type of client is what I call the natural negotiator. These type of people who love the cut and thrust of the thing. They love the wrestle almost of the negotiation process. They find it a game. They enjoy it, and these sort of people, they're naturally quite good at it, but they also realize that they're not perfect at it because they have a certain number of strategies that tend to work well for them. That's why they're in quite an advantageous position. That's why they've enjoyed negotiations, because they tend to get good results from it. But maybe 4 out of 5 negotiations go well. So things go well until they don't. And then they don't know why and they don't know how to fix it. They can often then suddenly polarize and have a very frictious relationship with their counterpart, and they don't know how to fix it. They often don't have much of a plan B, and if they do, they don't really have a plan C. So that they're also not very adaptable to the situation. And as I said, they have a limited array of strategies in how to deal with the counterparts of their other side.
So where in the sales process does negotiation start becoming a key factor in terms of being able to solidify that sale or that deal?
When there are details to clarify. I know that sounds a little bit uh, thin in some ways, but it is that. Are we meeting in your offices? Are we meeting in mine? Are we meeting in neutral space? Who's setting the agenda? Who's setting the time? If you're just selling something like you're just processing a sale, if you're trying to convince them to buy the thing, that's more sales than negotiation. If they're more in than they're out, then you're kind of getting into more negotiation of the details, whereas the actual buy or not buy might be somewhat in the bag. Now, that does depend on. I work with some larger corporations where, as I said, my program is called Goliath, or dealing with Goliath, the Goliath method, because that is the analogy. It's usually people who are in what would be perceived by an outside party, they'd be perceived to be in the weaker position. And so the David versus Goliath, the classic analogy of the underdog story. So I I'm usually working with those people who, as I said, either they're good at it and they know they could be better, they need more options, how to get unstuck, how to seize more value, or, as you say, they could be those business owners who know they're leaving a lot of opportunity on the table. But to answer that more direct question of when, one could argue you're negotiating at nearly every step. If there are details that are being worked out, if you're getting a feel and a read for the needs of the client, if they're opening up on some things and not on others, all of that is aspects of negotiation. Negotiation is essentially high stakes communication skills. And that's kind of the key point. It's anytime you're communicating with a view to influencing the other side, just trying to dig out their actual needs to facilitate those needs better for both parties, then you could be arguing you're negotiating. It depends. There's lots of different definitions.
So how much, sorry, of the success in being a good negotiator relies on being well prepared and thinking through strategically what are the options that you're willing to give up and what are you not?
Yeah, it's a key part. As I said, usually the first thing is to work out what your real value is, what your real non-negotiable are, and what has more room in it. And part of that, one of the things I get my clients to do when we start, I mean, we do some things so they can get some quick wins, but there are then the deeper work to do. And part of that is exactly what you say, is that preparation. And the first questions are knowing your business inside out. So knowing if you sell three products or services for the sake of argument, and one has a 5% margin on it, one a 15, and one a 45% margin on, you got to know exactly how much leeway you have should they be pushing or pulling or prodding. You should know exactly what the actual cost is. So one of the other issues, which is exactly what you're saying, is people often forget the full, almost long-term cost of doing certain deals where maybe you make a nice fat amount of profit up front, but maybe there's that's product or sale or service requires more maintenance on average than the others. Maybe it requires a greater setup or more ongoing support or any of these issues. And people are often forget that ongoing, let's call it a liability, that they don't build into the initial cost. And so often people can actually really shoot themselves in the foot. I mean, an example of that is often with software firms, even quite small software firms, you often have this, and this is very common with the bigger and bigger companies, is that the salespeople don't really talk with the engineers of the people that build the thing. And so the engineers are going, oh yeah, we'll throw that in, and just doing that last minute get it over the line concession stuff because they want to get it signed because that's their metric. Deal over line, this is the thing. And it's not this long-term implementation mindset, which is important. That's often neglected. And so you can see that in actual fact, at the last hurdle, the amount of times that the sales guys have inadvertently slash the profit margin massively because they didn't realize that thing they were giving away or throwing in for free actually takes hundreds hundreds of hours of developer time. Occasionally you get lucky and it's the other way around. Somebody has, I had this with one client where they managed to sell this thing because of the perceived value to the client was massive. And it was actually essentially one line of code. But it was, they almost double their profit margin from one line of code. So sometimes on a rare occasion it can happen the other way, but it's usually in the more detrimental fashion. So yeah, planning is absolutely key. Knowing the true cost, as in long-term cost of what it is you're selling, your different services and products, and as I said, the long-term implementation liabilities. That's where you can really get to grips with what you're really offering and where the profit in that deal really lies.
Uh-huh. So, what about personality? Because you mentioned two types of clients, the business owner and then the salesperson who is probably quite good at negotiation, maybe had some training, but sort of falters at one point when the pressure builds up. How does personality, even for these two types of clients or people, play a role in terms of their ability to be good negotiators?
Yeah, again, it's holding things in a certain balance. So, the problem with a lot of salespeople is they tend to be overly confident, believe it or not. They're quite good at sales because they have this confidence about them that you need, but often then they suffer from not listening. So
Right.
it's that introvert extrovert controversy where we tend to think the best salespeople would be extrovert because that's more obvious. But in actual fact, the extroverts don't listen and the introverts don't ask for the sale enough. So it's a extroversion introversion is a 1 to 5 scale, and where the best salespeople are actually 3. So they're able to balance the two sides of knowing when to shut the hell up. I remember when I was an art, I sold a lot of art many years ago. I was really quite competent at it, and that was one of the great lessons I had was knowing when you've spoken your piece and your client has the prospect has spoken their piece and you've getting out of them what they like about the work and how it fits and you're removing barriers and objections and all that good stuff you do as a salesperson. It's then knowing when to just hold your tongue, let that silence happen and being comfortable in that silence. That for example. So again, it's that idea of balancing the introvert with the extrovert, that you need to be able to ask, you need to be able to be comfortable in your space and not need to fill it the whole time. While at the same time, as I said, you need to be able to balance the two sides out.
So there is a
So that's sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
So there is a component of knowing yourself. Are you an extrovert, introvert? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses?
Exactly,
Would be
exactly. And also
helpful.
it also comes with the idea of how controlling or domineering you are. A lot of people go to a natural set of strategies.
Right.
They get into a fight maybe more than they need to. Other people go to accommodate more, where they're much more compliant and they're wanting to listen. They're wanting to facilitate the needs of the other side. Whereas what both of them actually need to do is not. It's the kind of thing you don't need to necessarily turn those down. You need to turn the other areas up because what you're missing here is usually the collaborative potential, and collaboration really is the key. I mean, it's a little bit of a cliche. We can't collaborate in everything, but collaboration starts with the mindset, the approach of saying, how can we both get as close to 100% of what we want? So it puts compromise to the side. Often we think, oh, and people are giving away concessions really quickly and people are being quite aggressive or maybe overly accommodating, as I say, their natural style. Whereas in actual fact, it's getting more curious, first of all. Now, this is more so with sort of large contracts than maybe more just facilitating a sale. So this is more into the deeper negotiation where there's a lot of interest and there's a lot of positions, all that sort of stuff. Um, but yeah, having that personality to actually get curious about the needs of the other side. What are they saying? What are they not saying? Being able to read through the lines and building that rapport. The rapport is key because if you don't have the rapport, often trust takes quite a while to build up, but you can build up rapport very, very quickly. Goodwill is the benefit of rapport, that level of just about enough trust that they actually tell you what their real issues are, what their real desires or needs are in that situation. And then you can facilitate that much better. But it also allows you to make the deal more than a mere transaction. And so many deals just fall into this trap where neither side really trusts each other, but they just about tick enough boxes that, like, yeah, it's not worth the hassle of finding other vendors, this kind of thing. So they make it happen. And it's very transactionary, it's very fragile because there's not enough goodwill there that when the occasional one side drops the ball, and there's not enough goodwill there to see it through. And so a lot of these things fall apart.
So tell us about the Goliath method. I forget the full name, but your training and what you're writing your book on. How do you help people create that transformation to go from being, let's say, a poor or mediocre negotiator to a good one to preserve their profits and increase their value to themselves and to the client?
Right. Well, there's a few different steps. I mean, one of the key principles that very few negotiation trainers or courses do is actually helping people manage their emotional states. Because emotion, particularly when you have a lot riding on it can be the difference between, oh, well, I have to let go an employee, or are we getting a new car next month? You know what I mean? It can be this level of difference. So there's a lot at stake. That has an emotional toll. And so being able to manage your emotions and actually then, because the one in the negotiation who manage their emotions better is more likely to influence the emotions, the thinking, and then the behavior of the other side. So that's a key factor that's often just sort of glossed over, as in, oh, leave your emotions at the door, or yeah, emotions are important, but they don't tend to tell you how to stay calm, how to stay in your power. So that's an element that I go into, and mixed with that, then from again working in innovation and entrepreneurship, a lot of those methodologies for innovation, for creative thinking, for creative how methods to find that extra value that we often, as I said, don't know how to look or don't bother to look. And so the thing stays in this really basic transactional level. We want to get it adding all that extra value, which also not just builds trust, but that insulates the deals themselves. So it makes them more robust in the short and the long term. But more specifically, I work my clients through a process which is based on preparation. We mix a lot of the preparation you were mentioning earlier, more standard negotiation preparation, which is all sensible, but then also a lot more of the those elements of that we were talking about, like the emotional sides and understanding motivation and needs and these sort of things on the other side, which are what's really going on. So it's the proper psychology of first of all ourselves and then of our counterpart across the table. And then, as I said, we go into starting to sketch out some ways we can add value into the deal. What's of very cheap to us that's of high value to the other side, and equally what's of high value to us that could be cheap or free for the other side to add for us. And those sort of things that sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. As I said, we explore a lot of that. And the next stage then is into helping, as I said, helping the clients perform under pressure, how to be fully present but emotionally non-reactive. So we're not like being able to be easily manipulated by the other side. And when I say manipulated, that's, yeah, sometimes it can be bullied or pressured, but more under the radar, oddly, as people who are much more charming, who are really pleasant, and they come as friends, and they're all warm, and they're all win-win, and all this. And the next thing you can have given away half your concessions with nothing in return. So it's being able to spot both sides, how to deal with the aggressive people and how to deal with the really charming, clever people as well. But from there, we go into then putting it all together, how you deal with it in the live engagement, how you actually put those principles, your planning and your preparation, what you do in the live moment, and how you then help them. So there's an element of coaching skills as well. I help my clients coach themselves and their counterparts to better outcomes. So all of it is then a lot of these principles you're using on yourself, but then you start to you learn versions to actually start influencing in a very ethical and very positive way, influencing your counterparts so that both of you can get better outcomes.
Well, that sounds like a very complete process. I remember going through negotiation training years ago, and it didn't go into such a complete holistic approach. It was more about techniques, focusing on the win-win, preparing. But listening to you, it sounds like it's imperative that you address all the emotional aspects too, because it's really about, when your emotions kick in strongly, it's your fear that's kicking in, your fear of loss. And how do you deal with
Absolutely.
that in the moment I guess, takes a lot of practice. Now, are you training people one-on-one or in groups? How does your
It's
system
both.
work?
It's
Both?
both. Yeah, Stephen. It's there's both a group element, and there's video training and whatnot to get some of those principles across, and then in the group or one-to-one discussions, it's then dealing with what people's needs are, some of the issues they might be having with how to apply some of those principles, or just troubleshooting some any levels of how to, as you said, how to apply it and live it in different situations. Some of those principles.
And what kind of feedback or results have you gotten from people that you've trained and have actually, sorry, gone out and applied this? Do you have any kind of like a story,
Yeah,
success story you could share with us?
yeah. I mean, there's plenty, and I'm not sure which one springs to mind right now. I mean, there's often, well, on one side, like one of the business owners I was working with who was trying to negotiate better with his clients, in the discussion, even in the first phase of just working out where the value is in your business, realized there was a huge amount, and this happens sometimes, a large amount of untapped potential right there in the clients he already had on an ongoing basis. And from that, his income, from that, the revenue jumped more than 30% almost immediately, sustainably, because there was a connectivities of the things that he was offering that he didn't quite see before, that some of that process actually highlighted. So that's one example. One of the other examples, for example, is I sometimes work with litigation lawyers, and it's you don't need to be a litigation lawyer; you can be a business owner. It's the same point. Is that it turned he had an initially very positive relationship with the counterpart, and then it suddenly exploded. He didn't know why. They suddenly hated him. It was massively well, chaotic, frustrating. It was confusing. It's like, what happened? I don't know. Blah, blah, blah. Because sometimes these things happen, when what you thought was a good relationship and suddenly it takes a total downturn. And long story short, he managed to turn that around to being well, certainly the deal didn't die. And then it actually got significantly better from being able to get unstuck. And so many people, when they get stuck in a lot of these situations, well, as I said, when those first few strategies don't work, they don't know what to do next. So different approaches lend themselves to more options. And one thing he said to me afterwards, I remember that because I love this. He said, I didn't realize it didn't have to just be like these few ways of being and doing. I didn't realize I had this whole array of options of how to be, depending on how the counterpart is acting and reacting. And he finds it hugely, hugely creative now, those interactions, rather than he used to have to be this kind of attack dog type of really aggressive sort of character. And then he realized, oh, there's so many different ways I can be to create these collaborations, create these and uncover that value and build that rapport for better outcomes. So that's just a few examples off the top of my head. There's many more. I mean, the other is just again starting with really understanding your counterpart's needs. And there's been a lot of situations where clients have had where they're in the mix, last five, last three for a contract or whatever, and they think, oh, I don't think we're going to get it, and then they work through some of the exercises I give them, and we discuss, and then they often get the deal. But on top of that, they're often told in the feedback like why they got the deal was because nobody seemed to understand their business like the client that I was working with. So there's a lot of that about trying to really get to grips with what is the underlying needs, what are the expectations, and what are the fears, uncertainties, and doubts in that when you can address them in a respectful way, people can really feel understood, and then you're the logical candidate,
Yeah,
to either continue with or work with in the first place.
well, that translates into higher trust and relationship, which is really the cement often of somebody choosing to do business with you. You
Very
have to
much.
have that trust in that relationship, and it sounds like applying your approach really facilitates that.
Very much. Very much. That's exactly the approach. Yeah.
So is there one valuable free action that the audience could implement that will help them become a better negotiator? And
Yeah, if there's one thing, it's even just, as I said, in attitude, is to just spend some time when you're preparing. You
right,
do your normal preparation, you know your products inside, your services and all that, and that's great. But I think the real thing you need to do is really go deep into what where are you meeting your client? What's their real underlying need? Because they'll have a presenting need, right? They'll have like someone who goes to the doctor, they have symptoms they present with. And then what's the cause of those symptoms? So it's understanding what they're asking for, yes, they want, but it's addressing the need. And it's not just in a technical way, it's in also what are then some of those emotions that are connected with that. What are some of the fragility connected with that? Are there egos there that might be bruised? Are there, what's at stake for these people? And again, if you can tap into that in a respectful way and be on side with that, then you can gain trust and understanding very, very quickly.
it's that
Whereas,
old
as you said, when you
yeah.
stay just on the task related stuff, which can be great, and it's not like you have to talk about emotions in the thing, but you can infer a lot of your understanding of those other elements that may be at play, where they think, yes, this person understands the real situation going on. They've read between the lines. They kind of get it, rather than just addressing, as you say, the symptoms that you're being asked to address. So
It
that's probably the
reminds
first
me
thing. Just think in that way. Yeah.
it reminds me of this old sales adage, which is people buy based on emotion and
Hmm.
validate it based on logic.
Very much.
So
Very
if you
much.
understand the emotional buying need and also appeal to their logic, you have a much better chance of creating that connection and getting a deal with them.
Hugely. Hugely.
And finally, what is one valuable free resource that we can point people to that you can provide that will
Oh,
help
sure.
them gain
Well,
better
I have an email mini course. So
right?
for about a week or so, it sends you an email with just an insight into the modern psychology of negotiation. Some
Okay.
of the principles, sometimes through storage or sometimes just through observation. But most people I know have signed up said it's very insightful, very valuable. So it's just one email every day for about 7 days or so. And you can get that on my website. It's Al McBride, almcbride.com/mini course.
Yeah, and
So
I'll
it's
put a link to that.
almcbride.com/mini
I'll
course.
put a link to that in the description of this video and the show notes.
One
I
last
did,
thought on that. It's actually connected with a cheat sheet as well. So you'll see
right,
a cheat sheet and an email course. So you get two bonuses. So that'll help you prepare in some of the fundamental ways. It's just a short little cheat sheet. The full thing is in my full course, but it's things that people so often overlook on just that short little cheat sheet. So you get a cheat sheet and then you get your little mini course
great.
coming once a day. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll link to that. Was there one question that I should have asked you that would give great value to our audience that perhaps I
Well,
didn't?
there are lots, but one thing I often get asked, because I think it's on people's mind in the background, is are great negotiators born or can you learn? Are they made? And it's very much the latter. As I said, what's fascinating to me is people who are more naturally gifted at negotiation, they're just incredibly good at it, still seem to get a lot of value from working with me. And I think it's because it's the realization that nobody knows everything, that there's always space to grow and improve our skills, whether that we're starting from the nice but nervous or whether we're very competent already. And those few gains can make a further massive difference. We can all learn and expand our skill set.
Absolutely. Well, that was great information. Uh, Thank you very much for being here, Al. I'm going to put links to your website and to that
Fabulous.
free, valuable resource that people can get. Thank you again. For those that are new to the channel and haven't subscribed already, please do so you get news of new videos. There's a whole series of guest interviews now on my YouTube channel and my podcast. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk again soon.